I know some of you are sick and... Hi, this is Paul. I know some of you are sick and tired about hearing these channels that nobody watches. But in my opinion, this live stream that Grim Grizz did on Sunday, November 20, was absolutely brilliant. I already shared with you the initial part with Grim and Jacob and talked about the fringe. But this conversation between Grim and Chad was absolutely tremendous. Those of you who follow my Vanderclips channel know that I've clipped up this video a lot already. I posted elements of it on Twitter. It's just great. Why is it great? It's great because this conversation between Jordan Peterson and Dr. John Deloney was good. John Deloney clearly has a lot of Christian background in him. He talks on the Daily Wire piece after the YouTube piece about his story with his mother, who was raised in an evangelical household where women weren't encouraged and maybe even to one degree or another banned to from getting an education, and his mother eventually got a PhD and is teaching at Oxford. So, and his father, who started as a hostage negotiator with the police department, eventually became a pastor at a megachurch. And Dr. John Deloney is from Texas, and it was a good talk. And again, as I've said on a number of things, I think Jordan has really sort of hit his stride in terms of these conversations. I think he's got some good guests. I think the talks are good. Some of these talks have some real nuggets in them. In this talk, again, Jordan hit again his point about sanity not being something just inside your head, which I think is a tremendously important and a very interesting conversation. And the little teaser moment for this talk I thought was outstanding as well.
I rarely sat down across from somebody and had them be able to articulate, what do you actually want? They cannot answer that question, and they fill it with addictions, they fill it with hobbies, they fill it with dopamine chase. They fill it with so much stuff, and nobody can answer that question. What do you want? It's, what do I don't want? And why am I feeling just uncomfortable? It's because of them, it's because of him, it's because of her.
Nothing.
Super opener, taken straight in many ways, not taken from, but same point that G.K. Chesterton made very strongly, that we don't know what we want. We know what we want to avoid. We want to avoid suffering. We want to avoid frustration. We want to avoid obstacles. But when you really press someone to get to know what you want, it's very difficult. Now, there are a lot of good stories in this video. Again, it was a good video. There were a few moments, however, that really exposed the middle class, wealthy, affluent tell that a good number of us sort of swim in. Another strong moment in this video.
Your psychoanalytic experience. Can the majority of people do this by themselves? Because if I was to distill down all of the pathologies in modern civilization, I keep coming back to one central point, and that's that we are desperately and pathologically and spiritually and frighteningly lonely.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if we can, is it even possible anymore to tell a 21-year-old boy, 21-year-old man, hey, you need to do this by yourself? Or is because I keep coming back to the first thing you do before you start trying to solve your problems is get a tribe, get a gang, get a couple of people in your corner, get a mentor, somebody you can sit with. And we've had to professionalize it with mental health professionals, but get some people around you to help be a good reflective mirror for you, because we're lonelying ourselves to death, I feel like.
Yeah, well.
Now, when you look at these two individuals that are not unknown to our channel, Grim Grizz, he was, if you YouTube search Paul Vanderclay double latchkey kid, you will get my first conversation with Grim Grizz. Not a man of affluence. I'm not saying anything against him. Working class guy who he's a working class guy, and my sense is he works from it's hand to mouth for him. Chad, many of you know Chad. Some of you know Chad quite well. Chad lays tile, and often on his channel you'll see him. He's got his coveralls on. He's out there at a job site and he's laying tile. And loneliness, why are we doing what we're doing right here?
Lobster, monkey, goose. I still haven't set everything up from OBS over here.
Chris is hilarious, man. That when he talked about like you can never say that you don't know. I was over here laughing my ass off. The guy is brilliant. And what I love about the things that have happened like over the last year and a half, 2 years, is I actually have phone numbers for people. We talk. I talk with Chris on a semi-regular basis, and I know I've called you a couple times, not on your phone, but like on the Discord. I honestly don't even know your first name, so that's interesting. But and I talked to
some of us know his first name,
Jacob. I talked with Gavin. I have Luke Thompson's phone number. I talk to people outside of here, and something here helps me. And it's encouraging, and there's an enthusiasm that I can get here and bring to the other places that I go, where I try to live out my gratitude.
Okay, community, big deal. Back to this one.
I don't think that people can generally do this alone. It's actually very difficult, and I think people can't do it alone in part because people, and I'm not being snide about this, people aren't very good at thinking, and they're not very good at negotiation.
Well, and when we're anxious, our brains shut off rational thinking, right? It doesn't want us wondering, is that a nice bear? It just wants us getting out of there.
Well,
right?
that's an additional problem. Part of the reason that honesty in speech is so important is that there isn't any difference between honesty in speech and thinking. So you said, can people do this alone? And the answer to that generally is no, because thought itself is generally a dialogical process. So what you and I are doing right now is thinking things through. Now we're doing that with an audience and for an audience, but you have some propositions and I have some propositions, and we're pitting them against each other and cooperating at the same time, and we're allowing the discourse to modify our implicit presuppositions. So we're allowing the discourse to modify our stories. And thought itself is internalized dialogue, or trialogue if you're really sophisticated. Maybe you can break yourself into 3 people internally and have an argument, but it's very, very difficult for people to develop a systematic approach to thinking, and then to counter that with another internalized systematic approach to thinking, and do all of that alone. Generally, what happens in a healthy society, as you're pointing out, is that we have people around us to whom we can express our concerns, and then they react, and then you react to that. And that's thought. And the fact that we would even ask people to do that alone is an indication, as you pointed out, of how isolated and lonesome people have become. You said friends are people you can tell good things to and people you can tell bad things to. And you have friends because friends keep you sane. And this is one of the things I liked about your book, is this insistence that sanity in some real sense is distributed. It's not something inside your head. It's something that you find as a consequence of being nested in a sequence, in a hierarchical sequence of proper relationships. And so if you could do it alone, man, you could do it in solitary confinement. And, even antisocial criminals hate solitary confinement. We're social beyond belief.
It's the way we punish prisoners, right? Is to put them in the hole. And we've just created a society.
Now we've had, over the last number of videos, a long conversation about, well, what is this little corner about? Well, what are we doing? How about the Bridges of Meaning Discord? What is that about? And I just wrote a long note to the mods at the Bridges of Meaning Discord just to encourage them, because what's going on Jacob's Ladder, what's going on on Grim Griswold's Clock Tower, what's going on my channel, what's going on in Estuary, which is generally not recorded, what's going on in Bridges of Meaning Discord, which is sort of behind a wall because not everybody should process. But it's all this. It's all dealing with our sanity. It's dealing with the big questions of the world because we can't do it ourselves. Now, in many ways, many of us theoretically know that we have to take to these black mirrors because of the breakdown of our churches and the breakdown of our homes and the breakdown of our families. And a good amount of this just comes out of affluence. And so in this conversation, there's an interesting section where they talk about basically getting into the community, and Dr. John talks about the fact that he wanted to get to know his son, so every week he'd take his son out, and he would tip really well at this one particular Waffle House so that he would get a chance to know the staff and they wouldn't him, and he would build community. And as sort of a middle class or upper middle class guy, he's got to use money to do that because money is something that isolates us. And what is so good about what's going on here is that, let's be frank, there's a lot of people in America that don't have a lot of money. And one of the things that I've noticed is that it's often the wealthy who are most lonely and isolated, not the people without money, because the people without money can actually have community because they don't need to use their money to lean in on it.
Where that's where we choose to live. And I love the idea of, I like to think of society, it's evenly distributed. We carry each other's burdens in different seasons. And that's the way through. There's just simply moments when my wife gets sick or my dad finds himself, my aging father's passing away. That's the old, holding your arms up in the desert narrative, right? Like we need other people to help us navigate these. And how many?
See, that was a reference to a story where Israel is fighting and Moses needs Joshua and I forget who the other individual was to help Moses hold up his arms to keep Israel winning the fight. This dude, Dr. John here, litters this whole conversation with biblical references. They are all over the place, and if you know the Bible, you recognize them.
I won't put my experiences into your marriage, but the number of times over the 2 decades I've been married that I've been hanging out with some friends that I trust, and I say, my wife said this and this, and my friends go, man, she's right. You're an idiot, right? And so I need that sort of iron sharpening iron, right, to help me reframe something that my body's taken off on.
And so what I see going on these streams of people with, like Grim Grizz says, I got 5 people watching my stream. Hey, you know what? There's a small group. That's good. I got 20 people watching my stream. Well, that's quite a bit. Don't look down on that. I got 100 people watch this. And part of what I realized about YouTube right away was that it's sort of, for a lot of people, AM radio. One woman told me, she said, I grew up listening to Rush Limbaugh because it was on in my father's house. My children are growing up listening to you. I hope that's an upgrade. So this conversation was just a beautiful conversation because what they're doing is they're checking sanity.
Look.
So, Chad, tell me about the shadow matriarchy.
My understanding of the shadow matriarchy. Well, I can give an example of maybe a bad shadow matriarchy. If you go and watch Just Pearly Things.
Just Pearly Things. It sounds like a porn. I'm not interested. But tell me anyway.
It's not. It's a woman who kind of hopped into the red pill space, which is ridiculous. Anyways.
The red pill space. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and so she started basically red pilling her liberal friends by playing Kathy Newman, Jordan Peterson interviews. And it was interesting to watch because, I don't know, it was just interesting. And I think that is kind of something like shadow matriarchy via the internet red space or red pill space.
Right. Yes. The way that women's influence over each other. I've been thinking maybe shadow's a bad way to call it, because like the reason we keep it in this.
Why is Grizz working on this name? Because this is essentially Grizz's project. Grizz develops memes. Grizz is a mimetic monster. He develops memes and he colonizes me, he colonizes Sevilla, he colonizes a bunch of us who listen to us. We tiny little few people who listen to him. He colonizes us with his memes, and he gets them out there, and in many ways this is how he changes the world. Now I want to go all the way to the end of this conversation with Jordan, and it's a very strong ending.
They tend to break down problems into actionable units. It's like, well, I'm depressed. It's like, well, okay, fair enough. But what's wrong with your life and your mood in the micro details?
And this is what's really strong about this conversation. They get into a lot of nitty gritty about practical things that you can do to hack and to sort of make the life that you have within the affluent frame better. And what these two are dealing with is actually the frame itself. And you wouldn't imagine that, because here you have, well, you probably should imagine it if you know that here you have two clinical psychologists, and of course Jordan will go to the other level, and I'm sure this guy does too, but it's very interesting contrasting these two talks.
And how could we address that programmatically? And I think the problem with diagnosis is that it's really easy to confuse diagnosis with cause. Right? Well, I'm miserable. Why? Well, because I'm depressed. Now, well, maybe you have a biochemical problem, but absent that, depression isn't a black box with homogeneous contents. There's specific reasons that you're miserable and unhappy. And what we need to do is to break down those reasons, differentiate them down to the level of detail where you can start to experiment with addressing them. And so if the diagnostic enterprise interferes with that, then it's counterproductive. And that happens very frequently.
Yeah. I remember the first time one of my students was hospitalized for major depression and suicidal ideation. I was taken aback that the first couple of days after, they had gotten sleep and were fed, the protocol was, your job is to get up and go take a shower, and then you can go back to bed. We're going to take these tiny steps towards, right? That's, my friend Dave Ramsey, it's, okay, we're going to get $1,000. Sell whatever you got. Sell your famous guitar. We're going to get $1,000 in a savings account first. And you're going to breathe for the first time. And then we're going to pay off your debt. And then right? It's these tiny baby steps towards, and again, I think we've been sold a bill of goods that mental health is, I just got to get all the right thoughts in the right order. And there's something I think we just swiped off wholesale, the behaviorist approach. I just don't see that working out, man. I think we have to often act our way into a different way of thinking and experiencing the world.
Well, the other thing, too, that people should take heart in consequence of is that, as you pointed out earlier, when we were talking about the cascading effects, let's say, of sorting out how you have dinner with your family, there's multiplying effects. Well, it might be very disheartening to see at what small scale you have to begin improvements, right? But the truth of the matter is that tends to scale exponentially. Is once you start making improvements, the improvements feed back upon themselves. And so even if you have to start out small, it doesn't take very long before you're on the upward trajectory, and it's not linear. You can fail precipitously, right? But you can also succeed precipitously. Once you get the ball rolling, positive things tend to aggregate together, and you can make a lot of progress even if you start from a pretty damn dismal place.
So how do we get that extraordinary insight into the public lexicon? How does that become a way of operating? Because all of us are we're running around staring at our own belly buttons, waiting to not fall off that precipitous decline, and we are missing the opportunity for this accelerating post-traumatic growth, right? We've been through hard things. Okay, that's the whole book, man.
Well, what do we do now?
What do we do next?
That's the answer to your question. Well, how do we bring that into the public domain? Well, you wrote a book.
Yeah, but
Well, and,
I mean,
and we're
that's
having this conversation, and so,
Yeah.
and
One of the things that I regularly talk to people about are books versus YouTube, because I kind of squared it in my mind. And at some point, I'll probably want to write a book, because a book is a different space than YouTube. But these people, Chad can't read a book while he's laying tile. Grizz is, not Grizz reads books, but he's, he can't read a book while he's doing his lobster monkeys and all those things he's doing.
and that is how you do it, and you try to communicate the utility of, what would you call it? Humble, courageous, incremental movement forward, and honest communication, social community, all the things.
When I started playing around with YouTube, even before I found Jordan Peterson, and before I was just doing the Freddie and Paul show and nothing else, I had someone in my denomination who was working at the denominational publishing house, and he was really trying to talk me into doing some writing, because I was doing writing for a variety of other things. And I sat down and I thought about it, and I said, if I write a book, my mom will read it. Some of the people in my church will buy it, but not read it. Most won't read it. Now, people in my church don't watch my videos either, but I very quickly figured out, probably for a lot of people like this, it's video, not a book.
Things that we discussed today. And I should also point out that we are out of time for the YouTube
All right.
interview. Is there anything else that you want to bring to the attention of the people who are watching and listening before we close?
No, I just want to say I'm grateful for you.
How to spread the message. And I think that is what these two guys are doing. Now, where this conversation will go, it's going to range, and it's going to range really magnificently.
The shadows is, well, when it's healthy and functioning. The reasons we keep it in the shadows is to keep it safe.
Yeah.
And so we make all the things we publicly kill each other over guy stuff. And then like the women manipulate the guys behind the scenes. And because it's like, who can control your enemy better than the lady in bed with him?
That's a genius observation. It really is.
Right.
Like I don't know. It's like, but see, this clip I ran from Patrice where he brings up Oprah and stuff. Like I've been paying more attention to set worship, which
Now, you have to know what he's talking about there. So let me play this for you.
A few months before I was born, my dad met a stranger who was new to our small Tennessee town. From the beginning, Dad was fascinated with this enchanting newcomer and soon invited him to live with our family. The stranger was quickly accepted and was around to welcome me into the world a few months later. As I grew up, I never questioned his place in our family. Mom taught me to love the Word of God. Dad taught me to obey it. But the stranger was our storyteller. He could weave the most fascinating tales. Adventures, mysteries, and comedies were daily conversations. He could hold our whole family spellbound for hours each evening. He was like a friend to the whole family. He took Dad, Bill, and me to our first Major League Baseball game. He was always encouraging us to see the movies, and he even made arrangements to introduce us to several movie stars. The stranger was an incessant talker. Dad didn't seem to mind, but sometimes Mom would quietly get up, while the rest of us were enthralled with one of his stories of faraway places, and go to her room, read her Bible, and pray. I wonder now if she ever prayed that the stranger would leave. You see, my dad ruled our household with certain moral convictions, but the stranger never felt an obligation to honor them. Profanity, for example, was not allowed in our house, not from us, from our friends, or adults. Our longtime visitor, however, used occasional four-letter words that burned my ears and made Dad squirm. To my knowledge, the stranger was never confronted. My dad was a teetotaler who didn't permit alcohol in his home, not even for cooking. But the stranger felt he needed exposure and enlightened us to other ways of life. He offered us beer and other alcoholic beverages often. He made cigarettes look tasty, cigars manly, and pipes distinguished. He talked freely, too much, too freely, about sex. His comments were sometimes blatant, sometimes suggestive, and generally embarrassing. I know now that my early concepts of the man-woman relationship were influenced by the stranger. As I look back, I believe it was the grace of God that the stranger did not influence us more. Time after time he opposed the values of my parents, yet he was seldom rebuked and never asked to leave. More than 30 years have passed since the stranger moved in with the young family on Morningside Drive. But if I were to walk into my parents' den today, you would still see him over in a corner, waiting for someone to listen to him, talk, and watch him draw his pictures. His name? We always called him Set.
And so Set is, in the Grim Grizz world, a god. And that god reigns. That god reigns over households. And Set has now produced other gods. And they've got little black screens. And they live in our pocket. And there are 3 of them sitting here in front of me right now.
For everybody else is like people watching TV.
Right.
I mean, but like prior to 1900, if you went into people's houses, you'd probably find an altar. And now you go into people's houses, you find a big black mirror altar.
A little bit of Christian Reformed trivia. The daily devotional put out by the Back to God Ministries in the Christian Reformed Church is called the Daily Altar. And it was years before I understood why it would be named like something like that. And now I find that name interesting and a bit ironic in some ways.
Right.
So, but like the way that the gist of the Set spell is you're safe, we're in control, everything is fine. And that's like the steady hum of the normalization. And then once that's there and it makes you feel safe to be watching the Set, then they can tell you what's normal. And that's this part where Patrice was going off about is like.
And that point too is something that I've been thinking a lot about in terms of we navigate and calibrate our sense of the normal by Set and the little subsets that we are around. I was thinking about the fact that 500 years ago or 1,000 years ago, or in many, many places in the world, some still today, but fewer and fewer, you're sort of brought into the world by a sense of normalcy of nature. So it could be desert, it could be waters, it could be woods, it could be all sorts of things, but that's the background. And then there's people. And then, of course, you're normalized into the group of people around you, into your tribe, into your village. And, of course, as urbanization grew, as empires grew and sort of forced kingdoms together, suddenly you needed new ways to calibrate normalcy, and those ways of calibrating normalcy would be what we would build, what we would sing, stories we would tell, on and on and on.
They like portray women as wanting, like you're supposed to want the guy with the roses and the flowers. You're supposed to want to be treated like that because it sells roses and flowers. But and like then the women don't recognize that those people don't make them feel safe. And like primally, like their subconscious primal systems are wired to like find a safe environment to rear children and someone to rear children with.
Now somebody on a recent video pointed this video out to me, Hayek, in terms of moral traditions. And I think what we're seeing is, again, conflicts between different levels of not just morality, but sort of the calibrating signals in our environment. Again, we're doing relevance realization through other people, and this is a continuous thing.
Now, I wonder if one couldn't make a criticism of some liberals, some classical liberals, of a different but related kind, and arising almost from your relationship with von Mises. Is it not the case that some liberals are so anxious to allow society to develop freely and spontaneously that they wish to remove virtually all habits, customs, all pre-existing inherited moral traditions? They want a very radical criticism of society. Now, you yourself wouldn't go along with that, I think it's fair to say.
Well, I don't know whether I wouldn't. I think it needs much more careful definition. Our basic problem is that we have three levels, I would say, of moral beliefs. We have, in the first instance, our intuitive moral feelings, which are adapted to the small person-to-person society.
Okay, so the moral calibration that we have through our experience with one another, obviously embedded within our culture, but that's sort of our face-to-face morality.
Where we act for people whom we know and are served by people whom we know. Then we have a society governed by moral traditions, which, unlike what the modern rationalists believe, are not intellectual discoveries of men who designed them, but they're the result of a process which I now prefer to describe by the biological term of group selection. Those groups who had quite accidentally developed favorable habits, such as the tradition of private property and the family, who did succeed but who never understood this. So we owe.
So in other words, we have all these traditions that we simply inherit, and we inherit them culturally, communally.
Our present extended order of human cooperation very largely to a moral tradition which the intellectual does not approve of because it has never been intellectually designed. And it has to compete with a third level of moral beliefs, those which the morals which the intellectuals design in the hope that they can better satisfy man's instincts than the traditional rules do. And we live in a world where three moral traditions are in constant conflict. The innate ones, the traditional ones, and the intellectually designed ones. And ultimately, all our political conflicts of this time can be reduced as affected by a conflict between three moral traditions of a different nature, not only of different content, one being innate and spontaneous, the other traditions we have learned, and the third, imagined designs of our intellect. I think it can explain the whole of the social conflicts of the last 200 years by the conflicts of the three moral traditions.
Now, I'd like to approach the question of the future society from a different standpoint. One of the principal criticisms that one gets of a liberal individualist society is that it is selfish, that it's not an altruistic society, whereas socialism, whatever flaws it has in terms of efficiency, is a society in which we all look after the weakest, the sick, the old, and so on. Now, what role do you see for altruism in a liberal individualist society?
The altruism is an instinct we've inherited from the small society where we know for whom we work, whom we serve. When you pass from this, as I like to call it, concrete society where we are guided by what we see, to the abstract society which far transcends our range of vision, it becomes necessary that we are guided not by the knowledge of the effect of what we do, but by some abstract symbols. Now, this only symbol which takes us where we can tells us where we can make the best contribution is profit. And in fact, by pursuing profit, we are as altruistic as we can possibly be, because we extend our concern to people who are beyond our range of personal conception. This is a condition which makes it possible even to produce what I call an extended order, an order which is not determined by our aim, by our knowing what are the most urgent needs, but by an impersonal mechanism who by a system of communication puts a label on certain things which is wholly impersonal. Now it's exactly this where the conflict between the traditional moral, which is not altruistic, which emphasizes private property, and the instinctive moral, which is altruistic, come in constant conflict. The very tradition from a concrete society where each serves the needs of other people whom he knows, to an extended abstract society where most people serve the needs of others whom they do not know, whose existence they are not even aware, was only made possible by the abandonment of altruism and solidarity as the main guiding factors, which I admit are still the factors dominating our instincts. And what restrains our instincts in this respect is the tradition of private property and the family, the two traditional rules of morals, which are in conflict with instinct.
That's an interesting idea.
And the guy, like, of those two guys he mentioned in that scenario, if that lady got into trouble, which one would she turn to? So, and it's that, I don't know, it's done things to society, but it's not like we're going to stop watching TV, right? So what?
I don't know. I think the EMP has to come first of all, because I think like I don't really believe in our ability to pull ourselves out of a free fall, like by an act of will or self will. I don't think that there's too much pull. Set has too much pull. Anything related to do with set has way too much power, and so I think, and this is kind of one of the wild cards that gets left off the table. Everybody talks about how we're going to do this and we're going to do that. We're going to assert our will and do this and this and this. But nobody ever brings up the fact that the sun might just belch on us a huge mass coronal ejection, or, you know, somebody's going to drop an EMP. Would it be horrible? Absolutely. Would it be great? Possibly. So it's like, I think that's really the only thing. I mean, it's kind of like the idea of hitting bottom, and nobody wants to hit bottom. Nobody actively seeks a bottom to stop. You know what I mean? I mean,
So the play on words there. But again, the question, well, how do people take this in and transform? Well, Chad the alcoholic says, well, sometimes they hit bottom.
some people seek bottoms. If you go to the Nameless video today.
Chezi, hello. I think that's how I say it. It took me a minute.
Okay.
Is this your rock bottom, Chad? Live streaming with Grimgris?
This is the height of my experience today.
A horizontal black screen versus a vertical black screen. Ooh.
You know where I started seeing the set go wrong?
I think the little pocket screen is really winning.
The first time I noticed my a bad manifestation in the world with my experience with set was, I don't know if you've ever had this experience, but when I was a kid, I remember laying in front of the television, watching TV, and my mom was sitting behind me on the couch watching TV, or one of my parents, or both of my parents were back there watching TV with me. And then I went to go say something to them in response to something I saw on TV, but I turned around and nobody was there, and I felt ashamed of myself and weirded out.
And that is just such a fascinating story, because he notes, now he's seeing himself and he notes, I'm having a relationship with the god Set.
You were able to leave the room without you noticing because you were so entranced.
Right. And then there I am talking to myself, and then I'm kind of like, feel weirded out and embarrassed, and I don't know.
And in some ways, this conversation is not sort of like experts above it. And again, I'm not saying anything about Dr. John or Jordan about this, because both of them are very real and very transparent and very open. But there's a grime line and a grittiness and an authenticity to this. I mean, even some of you might not know why Chad is wearing a lucha libre mask. He's Chad the alcoholic. That's in a sense his name online, and so because Alcoholics Anonymous, he's going to wear a mask to maintain anonymity. Grim Grizz is not the other guy's real name, and I've had some people have said to me before, well, he's playing an act, yeah, but it's sort of a LARP within a LARP, and I think in this conversation in particular, the man under the character really emerges and speaks.
Did you ever have that experience?
I don't remember that experience. I remember being a remote control.
And again, I remember being in remote control, and you can just see a living room, probably not one of affluence and wealth. And, well, I'm old enough to remember TVs without remote controls, and you have to turn that little knob on top if you want to change a channel. And so Papa or Mama are sitting there and tell young Grizz, channel 3, channel 5, gets up and gets down. And then the next thing he says,
I know one thing I am absolutely positive out of all the things I have been told in my life, none has been reassured to me more than that I make a better door than a window.
He's standing between Set and the devotees.
I am positive of that. So,
and this is a tale about class in America. It really is.
Hey, there's really something to that. I mean, even on a symbolic level, there's something to that. So
there's a thing I was thinking was, like, since we can't defeat Set without an EMP, but I didn't get to raise it.
And again, this is, and again, I am not saying anything about Dr. John or Jordan in this respect, because we all know Jordan's origin story. Grew up in far northern Alberta to a school teacher and a housewife, and so he did not grow up with wealth. And if you listen to Dr. John, his father was a police officer and his mother was a stay-at-home, and she eventually had to get an education to go to work because the family needed money. But in a sense, the posture is that of experts, and what we're getting from down below here is, they're both smoking. Chad has this little thing that he carved. Chad's a super artistic guy. And Grizz, obviously tremendously creative, very clever mimetically. And, Grim Grizz does have a Patreon, and a little bit later he's going to bless those who contribute to it. But
the kids, but if I had, they'd know how to make EMPs. I mean, I don't have enough self-interest to learn to do it myself. But if I was, oh man, no. But assuming things don't burn down, we could approach this from the Galaxy Quest thing. I mean, it's like
Galaxy Quest, for those of you who don't know, is a great movie if you've never seen it, where the movie begins with a bunch of now middle-aged actors who got their fame. It's basically a story of Star Trek and William Shatner going all over the country, continuing to be Captain Kirk, but then they get abducted by some aliens who believed that the Galaxy Quest story on TV were historical records about a valiant crew.
So we got the thing where you take a million case studies and extract all the valuable stuff and put it into one story. Sure, that's fine. But there's something about how, like, the way the beast system works out is that if the advertisers just want eyeballs, what draws the most eyeballs is the most degenerative filth.
So what does that do to the profit as altruism idea from Hayek? Again, it doesn't destroy it, but it certainly adjusts it.
There is. And that's just because we have the top-down suppression of our primal, because it's supernormal stimuli that catches our primal hooks. And so we have to have a strong top-down suppression of it.
So we're living in a world, and this again is Vervaeke stuff. We're living in a world that has figured out just how to hook us by stimulation, visual stimulation, and all sorts of other clues. And so we are, as they're mentioning, short of an EMP, we are hopelessly outgunned by everything that's around us. And, not necessarily from the top, but spoken from the bottom.
And so it's like, aside from people taking responsibility for who they do business with, like people who care about human rights on Apple iPhones, those kind of...
Again, back to Hayek. I mean, Hayek notes that, well, there's the face-to-face morality and let's say the face-to-face calibration. There's sort of the traditional morality or the traditional calibration. And then there's the rationalistic calibration and the rationalistic morality. And
the contradictions when they do business with. Like people who care about human rights on Apple iPhones, those kind of contradictions. It's like, why does our country, who doesn't believe in human rights, is against human rights abuses? Why do we do business with countries?
Aaron Wren just did a podcast. I've only listened to the first 12 minutes of it, of American elites prey on the poor by promoting vice. And Aaron Wren, of course, with his negative video I've wanted to get at for a long time, with his negative world perspective, noting that, in many ways now, it's the government that not only aids and abets the promotion of vice. This is a real departure from, let's say, early mid-20th century ideas of, at that point, establishment WASP Christianity that wanted to, in some ways, hold a tight leash on vices. It's a pretty dramatic change from a century ago, the ideas of prohibition, even though, again, prohibition didn't work, obviously.
Countries that don't live up to our standards of how to treat other humans. But it's not like I'm holding my mayor accountable for his choices. So it's like, what's an actual good citizen look like? And has anybody seen one in their lifetime?
We take turns.
And I'd never thought of that before, but again, what a brilliant insight from Chad. We take turns being good. Wow. Yeah. There's a lot of truth to that.
I think you can't be good all the time. It's impossible. But I know what you're saying.
Good Calvinist, even if he doesn't know what one is.
Yeah.
We can't buy into the notion that it's too far gone. Because
and again, another critical insight. We can't buy into the notion that it's too far gone. Why? Then we collapse into cynicism. We collapse into despair. We give up the game.
That's an excuse not to put skin in the game.
No, I get that. And so when I say things like the EMP and things like a lot of times people will think that I'm being really pessimistic, and there's actually a lot of optimism under that statement. I know it does. That's what it takes, right? You said skin in the game. That's really what it takes, and you would only put skin in the game if it was absolutely detrimental for you to do that. And so I think.
And again, to circle around, I intuitively have always wanted from this YouTube project of mine to create an ecosystem where people could put skin in the game. And in YouTube, skin in the game is often showing up in one way or another on screen in a community for each other. One of the things that I noted working with Haitians in the Dominican Republic is they had more time than money. And when I got to the United States, I noticed that some people, not all by any means, some people have more money than time. And so whether it's money, whether skin in the game means money, or skin in the game means time, or skin in the game means risk of reputation, skin in the game means sort of putting yourself out there to let people troll you or mock you or do something. A lot of ways to put skin in the game, but if you don't put any skin in the game, you're not in the game.
What do you mean? To do what?
To overcome or whatever. Or not, you know, like you're saying, it's not all lost. It isn't all lost. It just, we bought into the idea for a long time that I don't know, like there's been, I don't know how to put this.
Magic agrees with you. We do take turns because we can't all hold it together.
Right.
But I mean, the baseline acceptability is like the way it broke in me on the way here.
Now, again, contrasting these two talks, I mean, this was very much a how-to talk, and it was a good talk. And again, I'm not saying anything against either of these guys, but these two are asking deep existential questions. You know, I just read a comment about the really short video. I bet it said about cosmic skeptic being obtuse, and then the other video too. As I said before, I made those videos. I had a lot of people that wanted to. Wanted me to comment on those videos, and I really should return to them and do a better job at them. But I just got frustrated because these questions that I understand Jordan in some ways when he's working through these. When he's working through these questions, he's doing them because they're difficult. And I'm very much on Team Jordan in this, that to think of, to deal with all of these challenges about what do we mean by God? What is the nature of reality? What is good? How ought we to live? These two right here, and so many in downstream of my project, and this, I am more proud about this than anything that I've ever done in my life in some ways, because I see these people they're really dealing with it. And you might say, well, you're the pastor of a church, and I am, and I'm very proud about the work I do in church. I'm a Christian that is not, in any, that is not thinking about abandoning the faith, and I want people to join the church, and I want people to come to Christ. All of that is true. But as a pastor, I know that for people to come, they have to wrestle with the truth, and they have to do it honestly. And that's exactly what I want to create downstream from myself. And the fact that we've got people who are, esoteric and brilliant and extremely well read, like the big hairy man from the Pacific Northwest who reigns over Grail country, and we have Grim Grizz who couldn't get up to Canada to Thunder Bay, and we've got Chad who's laying tile in Wisconsin, and we're all dealing with what's most important in life. Now I'm getting excited, and it drives my wife crazy when I get excited because my volume goes up, and now I'm pushing the speaker. But this is what I'm excited about. This is what I want. And because I believe that in this wrestling, in this testing, that if we do so with a sincere heart, ask and you shall receive, seek and you will find, knock and the door will be open. That was another one of the videos I was thinking about doing today in terms of, I got to keep my eye on the time, in terms of what videos I should do. I saw that, one of the prominent Protestant YouTubers has converted to or gone over to the Catholic Church, and there's a reason we play all these tribal games and we pay attention to tribal lines. And I don't have any ill will towards anyone who makes a transition like that. I just ask that transition, same with people going to Orthodoxy or even coming from Catholicism to Protestantism, because that happens too, of course. But I just pray that one way or another, you will become more like Christ, and you will become better Christians, and you become a better leader to your family and a better servant to your neighborhood, and that the image of Christ will grow and multiply in you. And when I don't see a conversation like this as in any way useless or a waste. They're both bringing themselves to this with their real questions, and they're longing for home. They're wanting the regeneration of heaven and earth. They're asking for shalom, and they're facing the God set and all of the little subsets that are all over the place. And they recognize that, wow, we can't take down set, but what can we do? And this is what they're fighting for. This is what they're dealing with. And the fact that I, in some small way, could inspire them and encourage them to do this, I couldn't be more proud.
Was like, why should I when nobody else is? Like, it's been normalized that it's okay so long as you pay your taxes and go to work. Whatever. That's the minimum requirement. That's the standard level of participation in our society, really. And then you get like the people that go to church are one layer up. They're like one layer deeper part of the society. But like, I don't know, it feels like our species has been hit with weaponry.
And that's exactly the biblical story. Part of it is that we were given weapons and we hit each other, but we battle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers. And yeah, we're in a war, but it's not the kind of war that we should pit against each other. It's a war that we have to look and understand the hiding spirits.
Yeah. Well, like you said, so church people seem to be one level up, and maybe what they have at the base of their, at the real foundational base of their worldview is that we're never going to get it right all the time, but we never get to stop striving to get it right. And so it's like, whereas I think the world I lived in, I didn't live in a world with a lot of churchy stuff, but I lived in a lot of cinematic worlds and like Nintendo, like where you can play like Mario Brothers, and then if you hit the game accidentally, if you touch the box wrong, it like buzzes out, or if you screwed up, you just go press restart and pull the game out and blow in it, and then stick it in there, maybe put a butter knife in there, and you get to start over, but you're still always playing the same game. And I think about some of the maybe psychological or spiritual effects that sort of stuff has on us. I think of things like, what does it mean if in my whole life, when I go for any sort of picture with people, when they go to take a picture, they say cheese, and then I'm having a bad day, but I'm supposed to say cheese and smile. And so now I'm doing this.
Wrestling with the gods of authenticity.
This fake smile. And so I think about all like little things like that pile up, living in a world where.
Now what, another thing that fascinated me was that if you read George Marsden, the Twilight of the American Enlightenment, the 1950s, and the Crisis of Liberal Belief, terrific book. I've read it often, on and off during this channel, winner of the Bancroft Prize. What Chad is talking about here was the overriding crisis and obsession in the 1950s and early 1960s, the question about corporate man, and it was in many ways the crisis of authenticity before we had any of that language.
My heroes are all fictional characters living on the screens and living in a world where
and that, you know, again, back to the Cosmic Skeptic video, that is why, are you being obtuse? These are our gods. And again, people who in some ways still sort of maintain this secularish definition of religion, I think, can't you see? No, they can't. And I should see, I want to get into the winsome. I want to get into the whole winsome debate because, of course, Jacob thinks I'm too winsome, and some of the people in this corner think I'm too winsome. Maybe I'm the David French of this little corner. I don't know. Hopefully, I'm the Tim Keller and not the David French. But I get frustrated, and I don't know if I should take down those videos I'd made about Cosmic Skeptic, because I get frustrated, and if I don't, you know, Vervaeke talked about at Thunder Bay how, you know, he meditates because Jonathan Peugeot and I push his buttons. Well, Cosmic Skeptic pushed my buttons, and I want to say, good grief, man, your rational world, give me a break. It's not here. Wait till Grimm lays down what he says about slavery coming up soon. It's just devastating.
I say cheese for the camera when I don't mean it, and I smile for fake when I don't mean it, and I can play games and press restart, and Santa Claus isn't real, and all this shit, you know, like all this stuff. It's like,
oh, that stuff? You think that stuff is big, dude? Evolution plus slavery. I mean, it goes from like peasants to like the field work, the plantations, to the coal mines, to, oh my God, please put it up to $15 an hour. We're like free range, choose your own owner slaves.
yeah,
Free range, choose your own owner slaves.
yeah.
And like that would be okay, except so much of what business is feeding off the worst nature of each other.
Yeah. Again, we listen to Hayek. Grim Grizz has something to say to Hayek's ideas too.
Well, yeah, that's scary to me too. My wife and I are just trying to figure out where we're headed in the future, you know, and as far as finances and stuff, and like she's talking about solutions and stuff and maybe things we could do, and I'm sitting there thinking, holy shit, I have to spend the rest of the next 20 to 25 years crawling on my hands and knees.
Again, he lays tile. Spend the next 20, 25 years crawling on his hands and knees. I mean, so many of us in the Zoomer class, our limbs work fine. Our knees are in good shape. Our elbows work fine. I remember I used to work summers at a lumber yard loading trucks and unloading trucks and a little bit of customer service and some delivery. And I was a college kid, of course, and, you know, no better job for a college kid, you know, lifting a lot of weight, you know, good for your back, good for your weight. You could just, you know, take your shirt off, and hot, humid New Jersey summers, you just, you know, worked all summer moving lumber. And then there was old George Weissman, who was, you know, in his 50s then. And yeah, well, he was all customer service at that point. Knew a ton about anything, you know, how to put stuff together, all the products, all the wood, just had years and years of experience. But of course, you know, can't carry anymore. His knees are shot and his legs are shot, and he'd done all that work his whole life. And, you know, in America, we keep pushing that retirement age up and up and up. And, well, for someone like a pastor, you know, the difference between, hopefully, physically, between 64 and 67 in terms of my capacity to do my job, you know, unless I have a colleague who's got Parkinson's, unless, you know, dementia or Parkinson's or something, you know, attacks me early, You know, I can keep pastors go on and continue to work into their 70s and sometimes even 80s. People who lay tile, people who work trade jobs. I'll spend the rest of my life on my hands and knees, you know. I hear you, Chad. I hear you.
Paying into a pension that might not be there. And by the time I might not even make it. By the day I retire, I could just kick the bucket, you know, and that's terrifying, dude. And so, yeah, it is. It's a lot to cope with, man.
But we can just watch TV and it'll be okay.
Well, that's what I do.
So much. It's just getting through it. Life's it's like why the why of existence, as far as I can tell, is to give the middle finger to entropy.
Existentialist Grizz.
Of life. The why of existence, as far as I can tell, is to give the middle finger to entropy. It's like we're gonna live anyway. It's
Yeah. Well, did you watch any of the Peter Pan stories that we?
Okay, I'm going to jump ahead a little bit. I actually, on the Vanderclips channel, assembled something from this talk, taking out a few things.
I'm not speaking for anybody else, but what I found is something like try to seek some sort of higher power that works with me, that I'll be able to understand to some degree, and live in service to others, and make a decision not to throw the towel in on that deal. And that seems to be the only thing that really has worked. I mean, it doesn't erase the terror that sometimes bubbles up. It doesn't erase, you know, resentment for things done in the past. It doesn't erase all that stuff. It does help me cope with it. And it helps me to have like some sort of a aim to jump back on. Okay, so like here's the objective. Seek God, help others. Okay. Why? Because somebody else did that for me, and I've had some experience where when I am doing that, that's when I feel the most free. So I'm going to trust that.
Seek God, help others. Chad's been discipled by AA, and had to go there. You know, had to hit bottom. Got discipled by AA. Seek God, help others. That's when I feel the most free.
Everything else seems to be a damn mystery.
I had an experience whilst driving across the state in the last couple of weeks. It was a morning and it was misty, and I came around the bend, and as the sun was coming up, it was coming up over the big stupid windmills. It was just like really pretty.
Yeah, this is reality in America, 2022. The big stupid windmills in Europe too.
And I was thinking about like how in the timeline I'm from, Vervaeke's the philosopher king of the Church of the Optimal Grip, and
the philosopher king of the Church of the Optimal Grip. Don't miss these little nuggets. These putting them out there.
I was like, well, what is the optimal grip? Like in that moment I was thinking about it, and it was like gratitude is the ultimate middle finger for like the horror of the world. Like to be glad you're there anyway, regardless of the circumstance. If you have the internal capacity to turn your orientation to gratitude, regardless of the situation, it's kind of, it feels like a win button.
Well, it's like the other day when I jumped on your stream, and I was like, it was a bad day. I was having just like a stuck on me feeling, and I was like, I'm feeling like hell, man. And you said, go to Walmart and walk around, look around. And, you know, it's funny, but there is something to that. But there's something also too. I think gratitude, I can tap into it, right? I can tap into, like, I can be grateful, but if I personally don't integrate gratitude as a set of actions in my life, I won't be able to just tap into it. So to me, gratitude is something. It's a reciprocal thing.
Are you saying you don't have gratitude unless you remember, embody it? There is no agency. We want what's best for you.
I love that.
What was that trash you put out this morning?
Oh, I don't know.
No, I'm. I don't know. Can I shame you?
Please do. So
I'll show you what Grim's talking about.
And so, anyway, let's get into it because I want to keep this one quick. Here's an asshole. Your hands in my dirty arsehole. Fuck me. Paul Vanderklay. No! No! Wreck, hairy ass. Yeah! Yeah! Oh! Fuck me, Paul. This is the asshole. No, Paul Vanderklay is being obtuse.
I have to say, that's the most amazing story I ever heard.
Then he goes to Shawshank Redemption. So that's what he put out, and Grizz is going to take him to the woodshed for it.
That's not. It's inappropriate. I understand its motivations, but geez, it's.
So I want to explain something because a lot of my channel might seem like chaos, and it is. A lot of what I'm doing, most of what I'm doing, I think, is posing questions, and it's not a lot of answers in what I'm doing. So when I make a video like I made this morning, it's somewhat posing a question about like what are we doing here, and like look how silly we are. I could play the game too, and it's also about like if you step out there, like I understand that because
we do love you, Nathan. Don't we have our little spats, but we do love you.
I made this video. I understand there could be a consequence for that, and so like well, Paul said I didn't want to talk about this video, and so but here I am. I'm going to do it. So boom, he steps out there. Here's the consequence for that. Somebody like
probably shouldn't have, but
the digital gnosis is going to step in here and say, well, Paul, you're an idiot, and here's why. And so then I say, you guys are all idiots, and here's what I think is stupid and funny at the same time. And does that justify it? No. I mean, when I press upload, am I worried about what is about to happen? A little bit.
I think about Jordan Peterson tweeting, I'm going to tell my staff to change my Twitter password. And then, I got a lot of respect for him making that mean tweets video with Greg Hurwitz and Jonathan Peugeot. And, if we're going to have the power of, if we're going to employ the power of the pagan god Set and the little subsets, maybe we ought to have a little bit of humility, and maybe we ought to have a confessional, and maybe we ought to confess our sins. And maybe, a number of years ago, I thought, I got all this back channel of videos out there on my channel, and mostly nobody watches them, and they're sort of a mess. And but I thought, I should take them down. I thought, no, I should leave them up. There was a funeral once I did for someone in my church, and the guy I loved a lot. He had a lot of issues, and I started out the funeral saying so and so was a sinner. His mother was sitting in the front row, and she was not happy. She wanted me to dress him up and eulogize him sort of like an undertaker does to a corpse in a casket, which is fine. I mean, we don't want ugly corpses in the casket. But part of the glory of this individual, again, a man that I loved, he was a scoundrel. He was a character. after he'd check his watch when he got to be noon on Sunday, and after the service, he'd come up to me often and tell me some off-color joke that somehow in my sermon he had thought about it. That is a guy that I loved, and he was a sinner, but yeah, Jesus died for sinners, and Luther, sinned boldly, but confessed them. So,
but I also don't want to think too much about this when I'm doing this stuff. That's also a big part of my channel is it's a lot of impulsive productions, and there's something in there that I don't know exactly what's important about that, but there is something that is important about it. As far as don't think too much, follow the impulses, jot them down, produce a thing, don't overdo it, and just boom, and
trust whatever mysterious forces are putting thoughts in my brain.
Yeah,
that God will make the best of it.
Right. I mean, kind of like the other thing I made yesterday where I'm talking about a manifesto. I mean, you could look at that video and think, well, he's trying to say a certain thing, and I'm over here thinking, you guys have no idea why I made this video. You're not paying attention to the words I'm using in here or what exactly I'm trying to get across. But here's my thoughts and my observations of things, and let's see what you guys think.
And so often too in the past, I mean, I talked to Chad about this, and he'd say, I just want to play along. And he's right. I mean, why did I make my videos? That's not what Jordan was doing. I just wanted to play along. And we want to play along.
Nobody's responding to it, which tells me a lot about the question that's behind the video.
Well, yeah, there's a whole lot of know your audience going on. And like a lot of, we tend to think people are like us. Like that's our default model, is generally ourselves. And so it's like very confusing to people like me and Gavin why more people don't participate in the things we're trying to do. I don't know. I'd like to watch the documentary on that.
Now, wondering why more people don't participate in the things you're trying to do, that's every small church pastor and leader.
That poor kid's story, like what about being involved in this corner so traumatized that unless it's like the channel numbers grew from him shitting on it after leaving, and then like that enticed him, because otherwise why are you still here? There's either some trauma or there's a story there, but it's just bitter sniping, and it doesn't offer a better path other than swim in the mainstream, which even that's not happening. So,
right. I mean, isn't there something so alluring? I don't know if you've ever tasted this type of thing, but when you kind of touch the edge of chaos and you get a certain type of response, there's something about it that's very powerful. And yeah. So I would like to hear it too. I mean, I'd like to hear what went on with that dude as well. I mean, honestly, am I helping the situation by putting out what I'm putting? No, but he does bring a balance, I think.
Yeah, I mean, if you don't have opposition, you should hire controlled opposition. So,
right.
But it's just, I don't know, pedantic, I think is the word.
I don't know what that means.
When I act like that, people call me pedantic. So that's what I think it is. But I think your video was probably that too.
It was super dumb. But you guys mentioned something, you and Jacob mentioned something very early on in this stream, which I talked with Joey last night, and I said to him, I said, this is really weird when we get into this thing where we're repeating the phrase, this little corner, it's like this really narcissistic and neurotic. If this little corner was a person, it would be super narcissistic.
Yes, it was a great video. I'm not saying the video wasn't great. I'm just saying it was terrible.
It was.
And yeah, sure, it's narcissistic, but it's reassuring that the sense of community that people feel with the other people that are sharing the same virtual time and attention. Like saying that, like reaffirms to the person saying it and the people hearing it
Yeah.
that yes, I'm part. This is something. It might not be what people think it is. I mean, I like my version, like the last such a shame the audio is so crap on it. But like that last red ant floaty thing with the sticks poking out of it, that's what this place looks like to me.
Yeah. No, I loved it. I loved it. This little corner. It's just when the conversation in this little corner becomes about this little corner. That's what I'm talking about. And I know like that's something that probably
Yeah,
you
it's that the reciprocal narrowing starting to happen.
yeah, that's brilliant. Yeah, I mean, and maybe you're right. Like every 6 months or something, there's a bit of a reflection that goes on. What are we doing? Let's make and then all of a sudden, somebody comes out with some great stuff from Thunder Bay, and then we're stuck on that for a while, and or whatever. Peterson comes out of the belly of the beast and talks to Jonathan Peugeot and inspires people to something, to pay attention to something going on, like something like that happens, and then all of a sudden we trip into what are we doing and what do we need to fix, and look, it needs to, and
Well, I get frustrated. Federici's like, "Oh, let's start a network," and I've been virtually not alone network the whole time. And I still haven't got a functioning beholder.
And I won't explain that one to you, but
how
I think it feels as though I'm the only one trying to do things. Actually,
You're
and,
not.
I mean, now Federici or whatever, it's just like
well, I don't know, I think
everybody else seems content, like starting a YouTube channel and being a YouTube channel as an individual is the first step for some people, and then it's I don't know, maybe this is my narcissism. Remember, Embody, the fraternal regiment embodying narcissistic sociopathy wants you to know that not only are narcissists people too, but also we crown the good with brotherhood, and that's why we're going to be a fraternal regiment.
Yeah. So, when I made that video, I brought up the thing about innovation, and Thomas Edison had like 6,000 iterations of a filament to make a light bulb, and so there was that. But then there was something like 26 different people all at once invented the light bulb, right? It's kind of what's happened here. I mean, so you have the Virtually Not Alone network. Randos United was very similar, I think. The Bridges of Meaning Hub channel was supposed to be like that, something like that. I had no intentions of actually having a channel like that I would actually be doing much on, but I jumped into the ring in a narcissistic way because I wanted to draw attention to this hub, and but so you had all these different channels that are all doing this. Grail Country that does it. Vandy Clay did it. So you got everybody who has it sounds like something like the same goal. So
I think you're spot on, Mud Hut, about that. About the IDW. Well, not spot on, but that's definitely a giant part of it. People don't talk about much. The CAA influence.
Yeah.
But I think some of it is what's happening and what are you guys doing, and we are doing the same thing. And I think I tried to do your thing, I tried to help you become the hub channel, and you edited my shit and it turned me off. There was this. There was once upon a time, folks. PBK had this meeting with some estuary folks online in public, and the guy was like rattling off the names of the people who were being there, and I pointed out how that was related to intelligence officer work, and then Chad didn't get that joke and changed it. But like this thing where I say, like, if everybody watches their favorite channel and brings their favorite clips,
you don't have a community until there's been a failure of community and it's been repaired. Just like you don't have a marriage until you have a fight and you figure out how to have a make-up conversation. He's about to lay down another sort of distributed cognition thing here.
That's when they run them, when show and tell runs.
Show and tell. That's for Grizz, basically distributed cognition. That's similar to the Beholder, or at least connected to it.
That's the hub channel, basically. Yeah. Like you were.
In other words, there is no hub channel. It's the hub is in fact a network of channels, and that's kind of what we're struggling with. And again, partly struggling with it because of my refusal to use my influence as a centralizer here, because I think, for a variety of reasons, I don't want this centralized. I want it as a network, a distributed network that is much more robust, so that if, Pacau went off and had a baby, so his node went dark. But there are other nodes that stay on. It's basically how the internet is robust, and it's how a community and a church works. You have a body, and you have two hands, not one. You have two nostrils, not one. You have two ears, not one. You have two eyes, not one. You want duplication and multiplicity, so it's robust.
Taking a whole lot upon yourself to try and see what's happening in the whole freaking corner, which doesn't really have boundaries.
Yeah, so let me give some background on that first, why I edited the clip. So at that time, I was actually really new to the whole thing. I had no idea really who you were. I thought you were new, and I don't think you were, looking back on it. And I had
in a lot of ways, Grizz was doing this before we all got here.
A specific vision in mind, I think, for that episode. I had no idea what the hell you were talking about.
I get that a lot. It's weird.
I now, if I'm looking at it now, I'm like, oh yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. So, I did the same thing to Chris. So, Chris Petcall, when he and I did that, the symbolism of Old MacDonald Had a Farm.
Can't find the darn thing.
Oh yeah, that was glorious.
So at the end of that video, he initially said that the Christian church must die, or something like this. It was like something, and I edited that out. And he's like, "Why'd you edit that out?" I'm like, "I just no."
Nope.
Right.
Yeah.
And so but it was always something that Peugeot has kind of said a couple times, how the Christian church is dying or something like this, or the death of it's inevitable.
But it's got a built-in resurrection, so.
Right. And so, but I didn't know that, and I wasn't going to put it on my channel. Now today, I think I would just let people do whatever the hell they kind of want. If we're going to work together, I'm not going to.
But it was good times, because it was when whatever our corner of the corner popped off, it was look, there's people that can have fun here. Yeah,
which brought a real good balance to everything.
And experiment, and I think that was really for me when it felt like a shift. The biggest first moment for me was when people participated in the Alien Salience project. Because I didn't know Pet Cow at all. For when Gavin did it, it wasn't, because I already knew him, so it wasn't a thing. But then
now there's a lot of good stuff here, but I'm running out of time, and so the link to the whole video is down there, and the whole video I think is it's probably the best video I watched this month in terms of the conversation. But I really want to get to the Pacau's aliens project. Maybe I'll just jump to what he said, because it really nails a lot of things.
This is basically to explain to the aliens what exactly reality is, or at least how we perceive reality compared to theirs. So you would imagine that coming from a different reality, you definitely have some culture shock and perhaps need an explanation. So the most important thing to understand about our reality, I don't know how other realities are, is that we have no idea what's going on, and we're clueless. And the main thing that we have figured out is you can't act like you don't know. So we've got people who don't know, and they know they don't know, and they're doing nothing. And then we got people who don't know but think that they know, and then those are the ones that we're making our leaders. And so we're just, well, I don't know, and this guy seems to know, so we're just going with him. But really, we've got no clue. We're completely lost as to exactly what reality is or what we're doing. The best that I can figure it out is that I believe that I exist. It seems as though I exist. It seems like this is happening. I can't be certain, but it seems as though I or at least something believes that I exist. So there's that at least. But if I was to really say what that is, I couldn't say. If I had to describe it, the best I could, it'd be that I am observing the experience that I am having. I am something conscious that is aware of its existence. I'm observing. Beyond that, we really have no clue. From here on out, or from everything out from here branches to speculation. It seems as though matter is real. We've got taste, smell, touch, feel, all this type of stuff. It's pretty convincing that it's real. We don't have any evidence to make us think otherwise, but we also don't really have any evidence to make us really think that that any of it is real. It's as likely that this is all a dream.
That was actually my general thesis for my Thunder Bay talk that I didn't give at Thunder Bay because I didn't go because the vaccination line.
Well, I did the Thundercats version of it, so that was cool.
He did do the Thundercats version of it.
Lobster monkey goo. They're like, people are aging into what Paul does, and like his help the estuary as being a place where deconstructing and reconstructing Christians can mingle with saltwater idiots like myself. That's something that's going to be needed constantly forever, and people who have been here for long and long and long are going to be like, well, okay, I'm done with this part now, I'm moving on. And that's where I was hoping to be the shoes for the people that are and then there's the whole thing where, like, how many thousands of people think it's okay to just, like, people over 20 think it's okay to spend more than 4 hours a day in a video game. Those people, I think, need rescued somehow. Like, how to bring them back into meaningful existence.
Then a Discord server is a good place to start because they already know how to use it.
Because, like, by the time you realize that that's hollow, you're so old, dude.
Yeah. I find myself from time to time being caught between those two roles. Do I stay or should I stay or should I go? Because, like, I have found something very valuable in a couple places.
I played this already, so I want to jump ahead because I'm running out of time. The sphincter talk is just a jewel.
Some iteration of that question. And so that's interesting. It's like, well, what do we do?
Well, what does stay mean? What does go mean in that context?
Well, I'm a weirdo, so I'm an all or nothing kind of person. So like when I get the idea or the whim that I need to go, it means delete my channel, delete Discord, walk away from all this shit. But at the same time, I'm like, but I can't do it, and so I don't do like I don't have Facebook at all because I couldn't do like well just once in a while check my Facebook. You know,
Oh, so you don't have an involvement sphincter.
no, no,
Sphincters are important. Like, let me step into a spiel in case anybody's here for those. Sphincters are very important. You see, if you have a sphincter, you can tighten it and things don't come out so much, or you can loosen it and things come out a whole lot. And one thing they haven't told any of us is that your attention has a sphincter. And if they make you watch 15-second videos over and over, I don't think it's good for your attention sphincter. Oh, that's not the button. That's the button.
that's what my attention sphincter looks like.
That's like a shivering. Help! My attention sphincter is shivering. I hope to get into like all the different. I'm curious how many different opponent processes Vervaeke has identified that he talks about as part of the relevance realization engine. Because if it works out to be like 6, and we can stretch it across the lobster monkey manifold on the zodiac axes, that'll be handy.
Speaking of that, so I don't know what you just said, but yes, there's a band called Nothing More, and I think.
Okay, I'm going to jump ahead again.
There's this. I don't know. I assumed everybody that gets on YouTube long enough goes through a Terrence McKenna and Alan Watts phase. But he's like, the planet peoples, like the same way an apple tree, apples, earth peoples.
Oh.
And like in that same way, we're probably being farmed. But to the extent, it's like, so what? It's like, have you ever seen that cartoon Watership Down?
No, but I think my wife read some of that book with me.
It's on Netflix, and I think you give them your money, so you should check it out. But there's this part where these rabbits have to flee their home, and they on their way to where they're going, they end up on a rabbit farm with some other rabbits, and it's like, when you realize you're on a farm, then what? And is it just doing my brain and my social life and my mental health harm, having come to this realization that I'm peasant? It's like, I don't know.
Well, yeah, no, I get it. I remember when I first heard the concept of that, like scientists actually said that we could possibly be living in a simulation, and then I go to my wife and I say to her, "Holy crap! I was listening to Joe Rogan the other day, and there's this dude on there. He said that we could actually be living in a simulation. Isn't that crazy?" She's like, "So?" I was like, "What do you mean?" So she's like, "What difference would it make?" And I was like, "Whoa," because she was right. It's like, what's
right?
I don't know.
The difference is, if it's a simulation, it's a lot more. It's sufficiently easier for people to imagine there might be a way to interface with it that isn't readily apparent to people existing. Like the whole animal layer, like maybe because we can have intentions and prayer and stuff, that actually interfaces with the source code. So it's like, I think it's almost like saying it's a simulation is a way for people to believe in God without admitting they believe in God.
Right. Well, sometimes I mean, and ever since that conversation that her and I have had, there'll be moments that happen in life together, and we'll look at each other and be like, it's a simulation. You know, and because like I experience life in some very strange ways sometimes, like people can chalk them up to so-called coincidence, but a coincidence is like the way I see that is everything's happening together anyways.
Everything's a coincidence, jackhole.
Right. And so, but it is strange sometimes, but it happens so often that it doesn't really shock me anymore because it's like, well, yeah, I mean, that's how there's lots of really strange and there's like this parallel thing happening somewhere, but sometimes we have eyes to see and ears to hear when it's happening, and it's cool, but I don't know, it doesn't explain it. I guess for me it's kind of like a little bit of a wink, like it's all good, just chill, just keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah, but there's so many times when those little winks are so far from your perception. Like you get your orientation and attitude and alignment all bundled down so far down that like a wink isn't going to get through your own funk.
No, no, a wink doesn't solve the problem. It just, for me, it's been keep going. That's it.
It is a good excuse to let yourself feel some gratitude.
Yeah. And I don't know. For me, a lot of the embodiment has been when I begin to forget what life is about. Um, Embodiment has brought me back around to get off your ass and get into some action, because some action usually, again, doesn't solve the problem, but it usually will perpetuate a little more action forward. And so the less action I take, and the more I sit in the couch or right here and I'm captured by the black mirror or set, the more difficult it is to engage in embodied gratitude.
Ah, well, I can be grateful you're here with me, and we're being joined in the Hive Mind chat by so many wonderful people that we can come together to think and process and share each other's company, enjoy it virtually, and that can be inspiring. Like,
Great video for Thanksgiving. Gratitude is the ultimate middle finger to the horror of the world. Thanks to Grim Grizz and Chad. Thanks to Dr. Jordan Peterson and Dr. John Deloney. Thanks to you for watching. Leave a comment.